Hopefully this is the last time. Alright, what's up? My name is Tom. My artist name is Keota, and this is a project file that is a snare builder that I use to build all the snares that are in the sample pack that I just put out. It's called the Tacklebox sample pack. The link's in the description. There's a whole bunch of, there's a lot of samples in there. As well as snares, snare tops and snare fundamentals, and a bunch of kick tops and kick, and as well as a bunch of other kicks and stuff. So I'm basically going to be going over a bunch of different things. One of them is some random as I can get snare fundamental generators made an operator, as well as random snare top generators also made an operator. There's a couple different versions of each one. I'm going to go over the layering process for both of those, and I'm going to go over 5 different ways to process them and make them as punchy as your heart desires. So, to start off, I got the random snare fundamental generator. Basically, it's an operator patch, operator in a rack, that has a bunch of Max for Live LFOs that are linked up to different parameters, like the attack time, the decay time, the pitch envelope decay, as well as the peak, which is like how far the pitch it's going to pitch drop from, as well as the frequency of both operators here. The second one being just like a click, the third one also being a click. The decay is really long here, and sustain. It doesn't really matter though, because it's just gonna be affected by this envelope on the second operator. The fixed frequency of actually the first operator is going to be automated, whereas everything else is going to be very slow LFOs, so that I get different results over time. They're slow because if they were quick, then you would hear like weird automations on each clip here, which I have a clip every quarter of a bar. And that's not the point I'm trying to go for. The point I'm trying to go for is basically to have variety over time, and not just the opposite of what I want is to have audible automations on each given thing. Also, I should add, you're definitely going to want to solo each everything that you're working on one at a time, otherwise everything will play all at once, and that would really suck. I'm just going to keep checking in and making sure it's still recording, because I had a few issues before. Maybe I should start a timer. Make friggin' sure that this is actually linking up with everything. So, all right. Let's see. It was at 3 minutes and 20 seconds. I just started a timer. All right, pardon me. Moving on. The only difference between this operator rack and this one is that this one just has the white noise as the click, whereas this one has sine wave as the click, and then as the second aspect of the click, there's a little bit of white noise for the third operator. Moving on, and then here actually I have just recorded all of those, so then I have a bunch of different snare fundamentals. Nothing crazy. But it's, that's not the point. The point is just making all these building blocks and spending as little time doing it as possible. And then you make something with them later, and ideally it sounds good. So here I have random snare top generators, also made an operator, which follow the same principle. I'll start with the basic one, which literally just has LFOs on the attack, the decay, and then one that's every quarter of a bar on the high pass, and on, I think one is actually automating the offset and the depth to, this one is, wait. One of these is controlling. Oh, see, these get a little tricky, these Max for Live LFOs, but I try not to have the display open for too many of them at the same time. But the attack and decay are slower. The only thing that's not slow is the high pass envelope. I'll just play it really quick. All right. So this one is a little more, it's got a little bit more going on. This is a snare top flutter variant. Now basically I use this frequency shifter set to, well, it's on ring mod right now. So whenever the wetness goes up, as long as the fine is not at 0, you're going to hear like a fluttery kind of sound. It sort of sounds like a drumstick hitting and bouncing off a snare a little bit. So let's see if I can find a part of that. It gets out pretty cool because then I've got LFOs controlling this bandpass, which is set to parallel, because then there's the dry signal here. Actually, I'm automating the frequency and the amount of this erosion, and I am automating, or no, these are being, yeah, this is being automated as well. So this one isn't as random per se. And this is a lot of automations with just a couple LFOs, and it's just white noise in here, just like the other one. I think LFOs are just controlling the fixed frequency of the white noise. Then on this one, Snare Top Crunch variant has a bunch of different racks. There's this amp one has just a bunch of LFOs that cycle through the types of amp distortion, I guess. The dynamic tube, it has LFOs on the dry wet and the envelope and the tone. The overdrive, it has LFOs on the frequency, on the tone, and on the dynamics. And basically, it sounds like this. Which is fun because you can just move these around and get like a totally different sound. Like there's a vocoder one also with just the formant and the dry wet being automated by these LFOs. And if you just switch these around, it can sound totally different. I mean, it's white noise, so white noise is white noise, but you're just going to get like slightly different like characteristics to it, and that's really good for having a lot of variety and choices with the things that you layer. Or just having a lot of options. So I mean, obviously helps if you have good monitors, good ears, or good monitors. Monitors? Did I say monitors twice? Good headphones, good ears, or good monitors, because then you can actually like hear these differences that I'm talking about a lot better. But I've recorded those too. And also, as you can see, there's 4 of these variants of the recordings, but there's only 3 of these operators. That's just probably because I tweaked one of them. And then I'm distracted because the dog is barking really loud. And you could probably hear it too. Let's see if I can concentrate with that happening. The next step, I basically move on to layering all of those elements, and I would just solo the group, and basically what I do is one at a time, I would do some processing. So here are all of the snare tops. I set my grid to 1/4 because that's where all the clips were set, is every quarter of a bar. So then if I hold Control Shift or Command Shift on a Mac, you can cycle through all those different snare tops or fundamentals, and then layer them and get a bunch of different results. So here's an example. Okay, this one. Let's see. Or I can change the fundamental. But if I go later in here, I started to like use different layers. Like over here, there's a lot of layers. I don't know how this will sound. Let's see. Now, basically the point is you record these as needed. So if I were to hit, actually this is already on resample. So this is already soloed, this group, so I just hit record. And that's it, and then I have the snare. So basically though, what I do is I just process them as I need them. So these settings here are specific to only the most recent one that I recorded. You basically just adjust them as you need to, and then record it, and then move on to the next one and adjust them again. And so basically you're just playing with these on the group, the EQ and the glue compressor, and you're playing with the samples that you're using, like the snare tops or the fundamentals. Now you can also play with EQ and stuff here, but I try and not get too caught up in that if I'm really just trying to make a bunch of different snares and like just see what happens. But obviously if you want to get really in depth, you can like do individual EQing and processing on each one of these tracks. Let me make sure that this is still recording the right way, because this is like the third time I've made this video. I was getting pretty pissed. And I think that we're good. Yep, cool beans. All right, moving on. Now I have 5 different ways of like processing snares to like make them punchy that I wanted to go over. The first one being EQ and compression, obviously, which I pretty much still use on like, regardless of if I use any of these other methods, I'm always going to use EQ and compression. And most of these are already compressed and EQ'd anyway. So this, I'm not going to solo the whole group. I'm just going to solo this because for whatever reason, let me just actually move this over here. Delete this. So, and then same principle here. I would just make a track below this. Whoa, what did I do? And then, oh, whoops. And then resample it after I'm comfortable with how it sounds. Oh my god, that is so annoying. All right, here we go. So basically, here we go. I like to think about snare like EQing kind of in like a vowel-y sort of sense, sort of like how most people are, and like I'm talking about myself really, I like to think about basses in like a vowel-y type of way, and like synths sometimes even, but it didn't really occur to me to think about snares this way until I realized how much of a difference that just moving peaks in the EQ really make for like the tops, especially in snares that have like a lot of white noise going on. Like, around here it's more like a or, so you can see it makes a pretty huge difference. There's definitely a couple tutorials that really help me out with like my percussion sound design or in general, whether it's synthesis or processing. I'm going to link them in the description, but AU5 being one of them. He has a really cool video on synthesis, both kicks and snares. Mr. Bill does too, and then Corpus on his Twitch channel, which is like $5 a month, which is honestly a steal. He goes over processing, like a bunch of different ways to process things. So shout out to all them because really felt like I leveled up after watching their videos, seriously. Let's see. But yeah, same deal here. Just play with these EQs for each one, then record below, and you get your result if that's what you're trying to do. In this particular project file, if you just had one of these frickin' things, and not all these, you could just freeze and flatten it. The next method is chopping / crossfade method, which I saw from AU5. I think that this makes more sense to do with snares that have longer fundamentals. So here's the original one. Oops, I got a little underruns there. So the fundamental doesn't ring out that long there, but is this really just an example? Because here with the crossfade, and you gotta turn warp mode off so you can really get in there, because when warp mode's on, you can't really like get like as surgical with these changes. But here, you can really shorten up your snare, and this is specific to Ableton really. I don't know how the crossfades are in other DAWs, but I know that you definitely couldn't do this quite the same way in FL Studio. But that's pretty neat. And one thing that AU5 had also mentioned, which is definitely a good point, you don't want to have like, actually this is tough to, maybe if I move this over like this way, you don't want to have the audio, after it starts to initially dip, you don't want it to jump up again. You want that dip to be pretty like consistent, so, whoops. You don't want the audio to jump again, and a good way of seeing it is to consolidate it and just look at it. Obviously, it's a little sausage, looks a little funny. It's a weird sample I chose for that example, but moving on. Next one's Corpus method. I had always thought about the potential or the possibility of using Corpus for snares. And then I was hanging out with Chi, and he was talking about how that's like it's like, what's the secret, man? How do you make your snare so cool? Is it Corpus? Or is one of the things, I'm assuming. And I don't know, I'm not saying this is how he does it. He didn't go into details. We were hanging out at a party. It's not like we were being really productive, but so this is with the wet all the way up. This is how it was before. This is without. So without, with. You know, can really add some punch. And really the key there is just setting the tuning to at or around the fundamental, or a harmonic, I guess, if you're really like getting crazy with it. And the only difference with this one here is this one is it's a MIDI note. It's in sampler, but you can do MIDI from and set so that it will kind of like read the frequency, and you can either make it so that it reads from the lowest frequency or the highest. So I set it to the lowest so that it goes from the fundamental. Basically does the same thing as if you were to do it with audio, and then just set the tuning thing there. This one is a frequency shifter method, which really doesn't necessarily make your snare punchier, but it can definitely help with the tune. Like you can make your snare lower in tuning is how like I use this the most for, really, and still kind of preserve the characteristics of the tops. I'll just sort of play how it sounds with it and without it. So this is without, this is with. Because the way frequency shifting works, it's not like shifting a pitch where it's like in ratios. When you shift frequencies, it moves all frequencies the same amount. So, and since it's, you know, since EQs are set up this way, they're not. It's very exponential in a lot of parts, and it's like it's not a linear, you know, interface. Otherwise, it would be like a mile long or some shit. But yeah. So when you definitely hear, that's why you hear like the fundamental move way more than you hear those upper frequency content moving around, because when you move around 1, you know, to 10 hertz in the upper frequency spectrum, you hardly even hear it. But in the lower frequency spectrum, it's way more prominent. Now I have this EQ that I disabled. That is this is frequency shifter / EQ automation, which is just like another way you could like go about doing things. And basically I have like the low end, which is this third band, I think right here, just ducking out. As well as I think a high friggin' shelf, which is also ducking out too, but for the sake of example, let me not do that, and I'll just do this. Let me turn this on too. So this is just basically if you want to control that fundamental ringing out a little bit, turn it off. It can make a pretty huge difference. And you can just kind of like control and do like, you know, a little surgery on your snare. And it's really not that much work. There's no sense in like really overcomplicating it that much. Like, you know, you just control the level of one of the bands in your EQ, or 2 of them, and then just try not to get too crazy. I'm just going to make sure I'm still recording here, because I was friggin' pissed every single time. I think we're good. Looks just like it did, like it should. Moving on, sampler method. Learned this from both AU5 and Culprit from his Twitch stream, which is apparently a very popular method. Basically, it's just using a high-pass filter envelope or sweep that starts at or around the fundamental with a little resonance and drive to taste, like SMP. That's food and beverage slang for salt and pepper. And you play with the attack time and the filter amount. So let's see if I just turn the filter off. Ooh, little underruns. And then turn it on. So the attack time is basically just like this high pass filter is starting at or around the fundamental, which in this case it's below it, and then it's going up in the frequency spectrum, which you can obviously hear if I crank the amount up and I turn the attack down. It sounds goofy as heck. Don't want to use that. But, you know, it can really help add a little punch. Or you can use a pitch envelope also. in addition to or instead of. In sampler though, I feel like it's weird. This is simpler, I think. Or this is a drum rack. Either way, I think this is a simpler and a drum rack. Whew, wait, no, sorry. Here we go. So say your snare was already lacking in a transient. This could be another way to bring that transient back. Now let's see, and that's really it. Also included in this project file is, like, I don't know how many samples this is. It's a lot. I think it says 150 clips. Is that accurate? Wow, it is. So there's 64 snare tops, which are layered snare tops. These are also in the sample pack, but they're free in this project file. And this is a bunch of snares that I had recorded. I'm hoping there's no duplicates, but I don't really think that there are. There's 150, there's like 60 plus snares in the sample pack, but obviously I didn't use 150 because I probably didn't like all of those. Or these are some duplicates. Either way, who cares? I don't think they're all consolidated anyway, so it's not like it's going to take up more space. But one thing I did want to go over really quick though is just attack times on compressors for snares and this whole shabam. Ooh, that's a weird one. So that sounds pretty convincing for a snare. Almost sounds real. It's pretty cool. But yeah, so if I turn the range all the way up, you'll really hear what I'm talking about here. I typically don't really go any lower than 1, and obviously I can't go any higher than 30 milliseconds, but I think that 30 is a nice little sweet spot, anywhere between 30 and 3, but I really like 30 and 10. Let's see, wait. But you gotta crank that range down. It just controls how much the compressor is doing its thing. It's not, yeah, if you have it at 0, it's basically doing nothing. But your makeup still is working in full force. So, but it's almost like a dry wet knob, but not quite. Just reading the thing on the bottom left, limits the extent of compression, with the goal of maintaining a more natural sound. At 0 dB, the glue compressor's compression circuit is essentially bypassed. The more you know. But you can really hear the difference when the range is cranked all the way up, just to, in terms of the differences with the attack time. If I have the threshold down a lot. So obviously it lasts a lot longer with this. And if you turn that range down and bring that threshold up a bit. And I'm not really afraid to soft clip a little bit. I think for this style of music it can be pretty cool. Alright, so I'm pretty sure that recorded all the way through, which is pretty cool. And like I said, link to download this project file is going to be in the description of this video, and also a link to the sample pack that this corresponds to. And I hope this was informative. There's going to be more of these every week or every 2 weeks. Don't want to promise anything quite yet, but I'm definitely shooting for every week. And yes, this is a free download, so go get it. And that's really it. Thanks for watching. Peace.